In the 18th century, smallpox would turn into a horse-faced monster, or death. But in the countryside, there was a nearly countless saying. Milking women who were blessed with mild cowpox seemed to have reached some mysterious immunity agreement, although they often had cowpox blisters on their hands. But their faces were as clean as ever. The rural Dr. Edward Jenner heard this oracle. A crazy and poisonous thought ignited in his heart. Could we take the initiative to fight with the devil and make a contract in exchange for resistance to the great devil smallpox? In 1796, Jenner put this idea into practice. He took some pus from a female worker's cowpox blisters. He scraped some pus and then injected it into the body of an 8-year-old boy, which seemed to be was like injecting a curse into a pure soul. The boy had a fever as expected, but he recovered quickly. The real test came 6 weeks later. Jenner inoculated the boy with real smallpox, which was a complete murder, but luckily, the boy was safe. The smallpox virus had no effect on him. Jenner's witchcraft worked, but it was followed by a huge public opinion storm. The Royal Society rejected his paper. Opponents depicted him as a demon in cartoons. People in the painting who were vaccinated with cowpox, with cow bodies with horns growing on them. But Jenner did not back down. He published the research at his own expense, and built a cowpox temple in his backyard, and vaccinated the poor for free. He used the Latin word vaccine to crown the technology. History was finally on Jenner's side. In 1980, smallpox, the plague that had plagued humanity for thousands of years. However, Jenner didn't know why the contract worked. He just bravely opened the door. The world behind the door was still dark. 80 years later, two masters with different personalities really lit up the world behind the door, and from this, triggered a century-long debate on how immunity works. Debate of the century. One is French chemist Louis Pasteur. In the summer of 1879, Pasteur's assistant forgot to inject the chicken with fresh cholera bacteria. The Petra dishes were left on the lab bench all summer. In autumn, when they used these expired bacteria for experiments, strange things happened. The chickens only had mild symptoms and recovered. And when they were exposed to fresh bacteria, they didn't get sick again. Pasteur realized that the germs exposed to the air became weakened, but still retained some protective power. Thus, he made the first attenuated vaccine obtained through artificial domestication. In 1881, Pasteur employed a dome. He conducted an open experiment. He injected 25 of 50 sheep with anthrax attenuated vaccine. Then, he exposed all the sheep to the deadly anthrax bacillus. The result was as he expected. Almost all the unvaccinated sheep died, but the vaccinated sheep were unscathed. Pasteur proved to the world that we can artificially create sparring partners to train the army of immunity in our body. But what really made Pasteur famous was on that evening in 1885. Joseph Meister, a 9-year-old, was severely bitten by a mad dog. Once the rabies breaks out, there is no cure. The desperate mother took her child to Pasteur. Pasteur faced the most difficult choice in his career. He was not a doctor, and no medical license, and his rabies vaccine had only been tested on dogs. But in the end, he decided to take a gamble. In the next 10 days, he injected 13 times, injected the boy. Rabies vaccine extracted from rabbit's spinal cord, although it had been about 60 hours since the boy was bitten. But he finally recovered under Pasteur's treatment, and even later became the doorman of the Pasteur Institute. At the same time, on the other end of the microscope, a quirky Russian was observing a more bizarre phenomenon. It is said that on Christmas Eve in 1882, Russian biologist Mechnikov did a small experiment in his garden. He inserted a rose thorn into the transparent starfish larvae. The next day, he found countless wandering cells like angry guards swarmed up, surrounding the thorn, trying to engulf it. He realized that there must be a type of phagocytes in the chicken, which specialize in eating bacteria and other harmful invaders. So, the First World War of Immunology broke out. The humorists, led by German scientists, believed that armies relied on chemical weapons diffused in the blood, while Mechnikov's cellular school believed that to those trained troops who fought hand to hand. The debate was intense. German scientists mocked Mechnikov's theory as primitive cell-eating cell. At the academic conference, Mechnikov debated with the crowd. With eyes ablaze, history ended with the most intelligent humor. To end the debate, in 1908, the Nobel Prize was awarded to the two enemies, Mechnikov and the humorist Representative Ehrlich. The answer is self-evident. Our army in our body has a sophisticated chemical arsenal, but also a brave ground commander. If the previous stories were about how we identify and destroy our enemies, then what the 20th century brought brings a more terrifying puzzle. When the enemy is ourselves, what will happen? The pioneer of immunology, Ehrlich, once asserted that there must be some mechanism in the body to prevent the immune system from killing itself. But reality is far crueler than theory. Doctors encountered more and more unexplained strange diseases. Healthy children suddenly couldn't use sugar and died of extreme emaciation. Young women had strange butterfly-shaped red spots on their faces, and organs fail inexplicably. In these patients, no bacteria or viruses could be found until the middle of the 20th century. Scientists discovered that, in the blood of these patients, there were antibodies against their own tissues. The immune system treats its own cells as invaders and launch an endless civil war without enemies. Systemic lupus erythematosus is such an ultimate betrayal. The immune system launched a general attack on the nucleus, dragging the entire kingdom into a sea of fire. In patients with type 1 diabetes, they will treat the cells that produce insulin as traitors that must be eradicated and kill them all. Only now have we touched the truly disturbing truth. The primary task of the immune system may not be to defend, but to define itself. It uses a violent mechanism of self versus non-self identification in the chaotic material world to forcibly draw a line between self and non-self, and the act of drawing the boundary itself destined is paranoia and tragedy. Allergies and autoimmune diseases are the logical and inevitable extensions. Logical and inevitable extension. It is a mirror, reflects the most fundamental paradox of our lives. We desire to establish boundaries because of our vulnerability, but are tortured by them. This internal biological paradox are almost inevitably projected onto the outside. Looking back at the cities we built, the laws we made, and founded countries, or not. Just a social replication of our inner immune system. Social replication. We use them to defend against external pathogens and to define our boundaries with them, but also because of this, deeply involved in wars, prejudice, and civilization's autoimmune diseases. So the deepest question is still unresolved. Taste. Our fragile self, shaped by countless internal wars. Fragile self. How to get along with a world full of non-self. Get along when guardians and destroyers are one. How can we define true health and peace? This may be the immunology. Beyond teaching us to fight against diseases,